3 Skinwalker encounters. Number 1. It was the summer of 2012, and I was visiting my grandparents' ranch in New Mexico. The property was vast, stretching for miles in every direction, a sea of tall grass, rippling in the wind under an endless sky. A dense forest bordered the northern edge of the property, a wall of towering trees that seemed to swallow the sunlight. My grandparents always warned me not to wander too far, especially at night. They said the land had a history, but they never went into detail. I was 17 at the time, and like any teenager, I thought I knew better. One evening, after dinner, I decided to take a walk. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. The heat of the day was giving way to a cool breeze, carrying the scent of dry earth and distant rain. I grabbed a flashlight, more out of habit than necessity, and told myself I'd only go as far as the tree line. The fields were alive with the sound of crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl. It was peaceful, the kind of quiet that makes you feel small beneath the vastness of the sky. As I walked, I let my mind wander, enjoying the solitude. That's when I heard it, a low, guttural growl. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. It wasn't the sound of a coyote or a stray dog. I'd heard those before. This was different. It was deep, almost unnatural, vibrating through the air like a distant rumble of thunder. The sound sent a shiver crawling down my spine. Slowly, I turned, shining my flashlight in the direction of the noise. At first, I saw nothing but the swaying grass. The beam of light flickered slightly as my hands trembled. I scanned the area, my pulse pounding in my ears. Just as I was about to convince myself it was nothing, I saw it. At the edge of the field, just where the tall grass met the darkness of the forest, something moved. It was a shape, tall and thin, its silhouette barely visible against the blackness of the trees. My first thought was that it was a deer, but something was off. Its body seemed wrong, its limbs too long, its posture unnatural. Then it stepped forward into the light. My stomach lurched. The creature's skin was stretched tight over its bones, its fur patchy and matted. Its legs bent at odd angles, and its fingers, because they weren't hooves, they were fingers, were long and bony. But the worst part, the thing that haunts me to this day, was its eyes. They glowed yellow in the darkness, like 2 burning embers, locked onto mine with an intensity that made my blood run cold. It tilted its head to the side, studying me the way a predator sizes up its prey. And then it smiled. Not a natural expression, not the way an animal bares its teeth in a snarl. This was deliberate, slow, as if it knew exactly what it was doing. My breath hitched, and for a long, terrifying moment, I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, caught in its gaze. Then it took a step forward. That was all it took to break my paralysis. I turned and ran, my legs nearly giving out beneath me as I sprinted toward the house. The flashlight bounced wildly in my grip, casting erratic shadows across the field. Behind me, I heard the grass rustling, the sound of something moving, something fast. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I saw it chasing me, I might have collapsed right then and there. By the time I reached the house, my lungs were burning, and my legs felt like they would give out. I slammed the door behind me, locking it with shaking hands. My grandparents rushed in, their faces etched with concern. "What happened?" my grandmother asked, kneeling beside me as I struggled to catch my breath. I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Finally, I managed to stammer, "Something in the field, watching me." At that, my grandparents exchanged a glance, one that was filled with something I can only describe as fear. My grandfather's face paled, his jaw tightening. He sat down across from me and let out a slow breath. "There are things out there," he said, his voice low. "Things that aren't meant to be seen." I stared at him, my mind racing. "What do you mean?" My grandmother placed a hand on my arm, her grip firm. "We've heard stories over the years," she said. "Stories of something that walks these lands. It can look like an animal, but it isn't. It can mimic voices, trick people into following it." My grandfather nodded. "They call it a skinwalker." The word sent a fresh wave of fear through me. I had heard of skinwalkers before, whispers in hushed voices, warnings not to speak of them aloud, but I had never truly believed in them, not until now. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind against the windows made my skin crawl. I kept the flashlight clutched in my hands. The image of those glowing eyes burned into my mind. The next morning, my grandfather took me outside. We walked to the edge of the field where I had seen the creature. The grass was flattened in places, as if something had stood there, watching. "We don't talk about them," my grandfather said. "We don't acknowledge them, and we never, ever go looking for them." I nodded, swallowing hard. The fear still clung to me, an invisible weight pressing down on my chest. I never went out after dark again. Even during the day, I felt uneasy, like something was always just beyond my line of sight, watching, waiting. To this day, I can still hear that growl in my dreams. I can still see those glowing eyes staring at me from the shadows, filled with something ancient and hungry. And I know, deep down, that it's still out there. If you're enjoying so far, remember to like and subscribe for more. Number 2. It was supposed to be a fun weekend camping trip with my friends. We'd chosen a remote spot in the Arizona desert, far from any towns or people. The first night was uneventful, just a campfire, some beers, and a lot of laughs. But the second night, that's when things got weird. I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of footsteps outside my tent. At first, I thought it was one of my friends, but when I unzipped the tent, no one was there. The fire had died down to embers, and the desert was eerily quiet. I called out to my friends, but there was no response. Then I heard it, a voice. It sounded like my friend Jake, but something was off. The tone was wrong, the words slurred and distorted. "Hey, come here," it called. I shined my flashlight in the direction of the voice, but there was nothing there. I woke up Jake and my other friend, Chris, and told them what I'd heard. They brushed it off, saying it was probably just the wind. But as we sat there, the voice came again. This time, it sounded like Chris. "Over here. I'm scared," it said. We all froze. Chris's face went pale. "I didn't say that," he whispered. The voice kept calling, switching between our voices, sometimes sounding like it was right next to us, other times far away. It was like it was playing with us, taunting us. We grabbed our flashlights and scanned the area, but there was nothing there. Then we saw it. Standing at the edge of the firelight was a figure. It looked human, but its limbs were too long, its movements too fluid. Its face was twisted into a grotesque smile, and its eyes were black, like two voids. The figure took a step closer, its unnatural body moving in ways that made my stomach twist. The firelight flickered, casting long shadows across the sand. The air felt heavy, thick with something I couldn't explain. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, but I was frozen in place, staring at the thing that was mimicking our voices. Then it spoke again. This time, it used my voice. "Guys, help me." Hearing my own voice come from that thing sent a bolt of pure terror through me. It didn't just sound like me, it was perfect, down to the exact cadence and inflection. My legs finally obeyed, and I stumbled backward, gripping Jake's arm. Chris grabbed his flashlight and shone it directly at the figure. For a split second, I saw its face fully. It was smooth, like wax, with features that didn't quite sit right, like a mask stretched over something that wasn't meant to look human. The grotesque smile widened, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too uniform. Then it moved. It didn't walk, it glided, its elongated limbs bending at impossible angles as it lurched forward. That was enough. We turned and ran, our camping gear forgotten. The voice followed us, switching between our names, our laughter, even our sobs. It was mocking us, toying with us. I could hear its footsteps behind us, but I didn't dare look back. When we reached the car, we practically dove inside, locking the doors in a frenzy. Jake fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking. The engine roared to life, and we sped off into the night, the headlights cutting through the darkness. As we drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. It was still there, standing at the edge of the firelight, watching us go. We didn't speak the entire drive home. To this day, none of us know what we saw, but we all agree on one thing: it wasn't human. And whatever it was, it knew us. It knew our voices, our names, and it wanted to lure us into the dark. Number 3. I grew up in a small town in Utah, surrounded by mountains and forests. My friends and I spent most of our summers exploring the woods, building forts, and telling ghost stories. But there was one area we never went to, a dense part of the forest that the locals called Skinwalker Hollow. They said it was cursed, that something lived there. Of course, we didn't believe them. Until one night. It was late August, and we were having a bonfire in the woods. As the fire died down, someone suggested we go to Skinwalker Hollow. We were all a little drunk, a little reckless, and before I knew it, we were hiking through the trees, flashlights in hand. The forest was unnaturally quiet. No birds, no crickets, nothing. The air was thick and heavy, like it was pressing down on us. We reached the hollow and stood there for a moment, the silence almost deafening. Then we heard it, a low, guttural growl. We turned our flashlights toward the sound, but there was nothing there. The growl came again, closer this time. We started to back away, but then we saw it. Standing between the trees was a figure. It looked like a wolf, but its body was too thin, its eyes too bright. It stared at us, its head tilted to the side, and then it let out a sound that chilled me to my core. A sound that was almost like laughter. We ran. We didn't stop until we were back at the bonfire, our hearts pounding, our breath coming in gasps. We didn't talk about what we'd seen, but we all knew. We'd stumbled into something we shouldn't have. A few days later, I was walking home from a friend's house when I saw it again. It was standing at the edge of the woods, watching me. Its eyes glowed in the darkness, and its mouth was twisted into a grotesque smile. I ran home and locked the door, but I could feel its gaze on me through the window. That night, I barely slept. I kept hearing noises outside, scratching at the walls, soft footsteps on the porch. At one point, I swear I heard my own voice whisper my name from the other side of my bedroom door. I stayed under the covers, my heart hammering in my chest, until the first rays of sunlight streamed through my window. The following day, I told my parents what had happened. They exchanged worried glances before finally admitting they'd heard stories about the Hollow too. Stories of people who went in and never came back, of voices calling from the trees, of creatures that could steal your face and wear it like a mask. I started avoiding the woods altogether after that, but whatever was out there wasn't done with me. Every so often I'd catch a glimpse of something just beyond the tree line, a shadow moving too fast, a pair of glowing eyes disappearing behind a trunk. The worst was when I'd hear my name being whispered from the dark. One evening, as I was locking up the house, I glanced out the window and felt my blood turn to ice. It was there, standing in the yard, watching me. It was taller than before, its limbs stretched unnaturally long, its head slightly tilted as if studying me. The worst part, it was smiling. I slammed the curtains shut and spent the night barricaded in my room. By morning, it was gone, but I knew it wasn't over. A few weeks later, I moved away for college and I never went back. But even now, years later, I still dream about it. I still see those glowing eyes staring at me from the trees. And sometimes, late at night, I swear, I hear my own voice whispering my name from the darkness. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe and consider checking out my other videos for more scary stories.